Pile 'em in there. Everybody pile in. Hey, Francis.
Hey, how are you?
Terrific. How about yourself?
Pardon? I'm sorry.
I said terrific. How about yourself?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing well. Despite the Band-Aid on my face, it's just dermatologist got a hold of me the other day.
Oh, yeah. I do not. I know that's coming due. So you're not looking forward to that. But I know it is coming. So it's going to be pretty good. Let me check one more thing here. I'm pretty sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm left Elena. Tell your sister I'm coming, Vernona. I got it. I figured she would be at the ball game today. Everyone's muted so far.
It's Gary Sheen. I'm not.
Yes. No. Oh, it usually goes like this. That's why my agenda is everybody settles in. People start coming in.
That's typical. If I start cussing, I'll mute myself.
So first, welcome. There's Jeff. He's got a George Brett birthday shirt on. I should run downstairs to get mine. I have one.
You got one? And what? You know what? I did get it for my birthday. Look at you.
Well, it's also George Brett's birthday.
Oh, that's true.
Like it might have been yesterday, but it's George Brett's birthday.
It's right around now, yeah.
There's Howard. There's Keith. Oh, there's Dave. I've got him stuck out in the lobby. The one thing is when I usually host one, I don't use the waiting room. It's not very useful, but SABR uses it to make sure we don't get some untoward Cardinal fans or anything like that.
There's another one. There's my sister now.
Yeah, they get a little rowdy, So you have to make sure you screen for that. I told Paul Gardner he's not invited anymore. We already have our limit. So, and then every now and then Howard loses his mind on those Red Sox stuff. So what takes is a minute.
Are you sure that's Red Sox behind him? I'm not sure.
Oh,
you want to see the one 2013, 28?
No, that's plenty. That's plenty. All right, give it another second. I will say this. So Gary, welcome. You never know. And he immediately leaves. He dumped out. I welcome Gary.
I'm here. I muted myself because I was drinking water and I don't want to hear me.
No, we love that.
So I joined. I mean, I had joined SABR once before, but I was working and kids and blah 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 and had no time. So now I'm retired. So I said, I'll give that a shot again. So I did. So here I am, and I'm glad that we have a Carolinas chapter. It'd be great at some point if we could meet live. That would be even better. Even though I spent my whole career in tech in virtual, and I virtual, when I used to sell it, it was as good as live. But the truth is, we all know it's not really as good as live. I mean, we can all say it is, but it's not, right? So I don't have to sell it anymore, so it doesn't matter.
I was very excited because, for those of you who don't take the time to read the SABR notes, one of the first things I do when I get SABR notes, I scroll to the bottom where they say new members. And Gary is a return member, and he's in Cary, which is obviously, I lived in Cary for 20 years. I think Jeff technically lives in Cary.
I do.
And I don't know who else lives in Cary, but we're still around the triangle.
Yeah, that's fine.
And we did actually have face-to-face ones. We usually get together in Carborough, but that's because I live in Durham. But they also, everyone says, oh, have it here, have it there. But Carborough has a place that lets you have space for free. And that, because people, they really want you to pay for.
Yeah.
And we could do it in a library where it's free and everyone just has water and you better be.
We can't talk, right? We'll have to be quiet. So.
Chris, there is a Hickory Tavern in Cary as well where it's the same deal. So we could do it there.
It's fine.
I don't think it was any better.
Anywhere in the triangle is fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So
it depends on.
I'm glad I'm here.
Yes, I'm glad you're here. So welcome. Anything you want to tell us who you're a fan of?
Well, I grew up in, I was born in Brooklyn and grew up in Queens, pre-Mets. So I'm a Yankees fan. I'm a Yankees fan, diehard till through the 70s. And then today, I don't follow anybody because I'm kind of fed up with the whole nonsense, what the game's become. So my focus right now is pre-war baseball, particularly early baseball, and probably we'll say players through we'll say 1970-ish, right? And that's it. The other thing I've actually done is I really appreciate autographs. And long story short, I had accumulated a bunch of stuff through the mail before it became a business.
Wow.
And I've been focusing, let's just say, collecting, organizing, and focusing on things I really want that bring me joy. And I've been selling off all the other stuff to fund the things I like, right? So I sold off a whole bunch of stuff. I have probably a couple hundred more things. And this isn't an ad or anything. It's just a matter of, my wife tells me, it's great you want to go get that stuff, but you have to be self-funding.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, you can see it over my shoulder is a card catalog. That card catalog is baseball cards.
Yeah, so
and I have books, and I have 2 card catalogs and cases. And my wife at some point says, I don't know what you think is going to happen with those.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
No. But you know how you want a Viking funeral? That's the king.
So my kids don't really have the interest, right? My kids are like, if something's important to you, Dad, we'd like it, but other than that, we don't. So I've been getting rid of a lot of stuff, just to fund the stuff I really want, right? And that's kind of where it's at. And the other thing is, I had so much stuff after a while, there's too much, you can't even enjoy it, right? Because what am I going to do? Break out a binder of 500 autographed 1980s baseball cards that I never look at? It's ridiculous. So that's what I've been doing. So that's why I'm born in Brooklyn, Grove, Queens, moved here about 30 years ago with the relocation from IBM at the time. And I've lived there. I have 4 kids. They're all grown, 1 married, and that's kind of it. That's all I am.
Well, welcome. I hope you enjoy. We almost always have presentations, and
great.
And, it's often guests that aren't local, but to this time we have a couple of local guys going, and Howard is going to have a trivia contest that is extremely difficult, where you can win something that you I'm
not a trivia guy. Trivia bores me, so I probably, that's nice. A lot of people love it. I went with my kids a couple of times. You go to the bar and you do the trivia. Yeah. And was, I'll say politely, even with them, I was disinterested. So I'm not an in the weeds guy. I like the story of the game, right? I liked about the players. I don't need to know, in 1923 there was this pitcher who pitched, left-handed and right-handed. That's a fun fact on the back of a baseball card, but that's not me. Some people love it. It's not me. Be honest, just to be candid.
Oh, that's all right. But it is fun, and they're usually recent enough that it's pretty interesting.
I might learn something new. You never know. It's actually really easy for me to do because I don't know very much. So, thanks everybody. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see everybody on, and this is great. The timing was fantastic. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gary. Before we kick off, does anybody have anything exciting they want to add? You saw the agenda. Dave is going to have a presentation on, contracts and expansion years. Contracts and extension years. Is that the phrase? I said it right this time. And then Keith is going to talk about the Lackawanna League. So, Gary, if you want some pre-war stuff, Keith can bring it. He is the Nolan Ryan of war stuff. And I don't know if we should say Aroldis Chapman or Jordan Hicks. I don't know who the new Nolan Ryan is, but I'm saying
Nolan Ryan's good. I can live with that.
Yeah.
We can say, or we can do the Tom Seaver of
I don't like to just besmirch Tom Seaver's name, so we don't hand that one out. I could say he's the Bob Gibson though.
Okay.
He'll knock you down with some facts.
As long as I'm known as the second Howard Wasserman, that's okay.
Well, there is apparently a second one. Oh, by the way, he is going to be on one of our guests in the upcoming things.
Good.
And I have no intention of telling him we already have a Howard Wasserman. So that's really going to be, he'll get the agenda. It says presentation from Howard Wasserman, then trivia from Howard Wasserman. And I'll see if he prepares a trivia set. It'll be just to see how that goes. It'll be pretty entertaining, but it'll be fun nonetheless. Certainly, his topic looked interesting, and it certainly raised questions in my mind. Before we start, I did want to say, if you do Twitter and you have a favorite baseball team, one of the best recent follows I stumbled upon, it just started this year, is called Umpire Cards. Everyone thinks that their team is getting jammed up by the umpire. This automated system, it's a guy that pulls the data from Major League Baseball, and the next day he puts out, and it talks about how much your team got jammed up by the umpire. And it is fantastic. I'll call up my Twitter and I'll find one. Bueller probably already has it by the time I finish that sentence, but it is absolutely fantastic. And he's got great research. So I'm one of the things I write for Mets 360, which is a baseball website about the Mets, if you really want to know some boring baseball articles. And one of the, is how jammed up have the Mets gotten through the first 2 months based on the home plate umpire. So if you really, it's really amazing. It's just math. So it's not this guy's opinion, which is my favorite part of any of this stuff. So does anyone else have anything just of interest that they hope that they want to mix in as the new business or old business before we start with Dave's presentation?
I think at some point it would be worth a discussion of when might we get back together in person, and could it be the next one? But
No, we'll do that at the end. Well, maybe
that's fine. That's fine.
Earlier. We're still, I think, a month away from the governor really cutting us loose. When I was chatting with him on Thursday, I joked because my company had an opening of a new building, a large manufacturing building, and the governor came and spoke for 10 minutes or whatever. So, yay, the governor! Me and the governor were like 5 feet apart. He didn't get near the governor. There was a lot of security, but the attorney general and I did speak. So, Jeff, expect a call.
Okay, sounds good.
But otherwise, that's good. Anything else? Are you about ready, Dave? You're going to be able. You got us set up?
Yeah, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention is that I do have to depart at 3:30, and I did want to mention. In fact, I do see Francis there, who I have not seen in 25 years. Hello, Francis.
That's right. It's great to see you again, Dave. I was awfully glad to hear that you were going to give this presentation.
Yeah, it's good to see you also.
We'll have to get together. We're not that far apart here. Kernersville,
right.
Greensboro.
That's right. The only thing I wanted to mention was if anybody out there is in need of backfilling some old baseball research journals or some old minor league books, I'm doing some downsizing, and if you have any need of filling some gaps, let me know. They're free of charge. Somehow I get them to you or hold them for you until we meet live again. So I just wanted to throw that out. You can email me at my email address on the SABR website and just let me know. Okay. What Chris had just mentioned, I had, first of all, I belonged to SABR back in the 90s, stepped away for a number of years because of job and family, as many of us sometimes are affected to raise our families or because we travel a lot and all that. So I just got back into this recently, and I had done some things with the amateur draft back in the 1990s in the Baseball Research Journal, but haven't really done a whole lot since, other than what's on my profile in SABR. But what I wanted to try to do was take a look at, I'm going to show you hopefully this will come up.
Yeah. If you just hit your screen down at the bottom.
Can you see that?
Not yet. You have to click share screen and then click the particular PowerPoint you want to share. You have to open it on your desktop, then share it on our top. You see,
okay, so allow.
I can see where you're dialed in on the computer, and you should say share screen. Click that. Do you see the share screen button at the bottom of your screen?
Yeah, I hit that. I'm sorry for being a little bit.
And then
Yeah, I
it
did.
should
Then there's
call up 4 potential ones. Here, I'll see if I can go. Let's try this right quick. Did I share my screen of y'all?
Yep.
Now I'll stop that share. So you just click the share screen.
Okay. And I hit the share screen and then I hit but you don't see that.
No, it's not coming up. I don't know why it's not coming up on your other entry.
Sorry. Yeah. It just says my browser is preventing access to my screen.
Yes. So you're going to have to, you probably had to have a pop-up limit on your thing. So you have to go to your ad block or whatever and turn that off.
Yeah. So where might that be?
Dave,
Right-hand corner of your browser.
Dave and Chris, I don't know the first thing about this stuff, but I do see, Dave, that you have a second. I don't know if it has anything to do with the problem, but there's a second box that shows your name on the screen.
Yes.
It's muted right now.
So that is his laptop, his desktop, which doesn't have a camera.
Oh,
so
okay.
On his camera on his phone.
Yeah, I didn't.
I have it, and let me get this downloaded, and I can call it up, and you will be able to enunciate and just say, go to the next screen. It'll be very easy for us all.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, I'm trying to. I hate to have you have to do this, Chris.
That's the thing I do all the time. There's no problem with me doing it whatsoever. The reason we know how is because sometimes if we have a guest from out of town and they, like when we had Rob Nyer or Jay Jaffe, they couldn't, for whatever reason, use Skype. Because we invented this because we had our guests early on call in and we would Skype them before the pandemic, right? And so they would Skype in and do a talk. So let's see how this works. Let me switch this to this. That didn't, there it goes. Now let me, oh, you stink. Am I sharing? Who's sharing?
Nobody, well, there's nothing being shared that I can see right now.
Okay, it looked like I was sharing for a second there. Okay, and here we go. Oh, I'm setting up the presentation view. But here we go. You ready, Dave?
Yeah, if you would, put up the Excel first, because I just want to just touch on that a second.
Okay, let me get that. It looks like you timed yourself in the presenting. All right. What? Timed yourself like you practiced. Can you see my screen? Am I sharing the right thing?
Yeah.
You are. There's an Excel file up.
Okay. So I'm going to go on my my PowerPoint here real quick as you have the spreadsheet. What I did was over the years, I guess I get a little bit concerned about Major League Baseball and where these contracts are going and the affordability of the sport. I'm sure some, if not all of you, have thought maybe the same thing, where these salaries are going and where these contracts are going. So what I decided to do is I was able to find a website called COTS, Baseball Contracts. I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, have seen this website, looked at it maybe from time to time. And it runs an analysis from 1991 up until the current year. So what I did was I decided, and I went to another website and found some of the contract extensions. So you had the COTS baseball contracts has to do with free agent contracts where teams are going from one team to another. And then you have the contract extensions that players sign with their existing teams. And in the last 30 years, through the COVID year, signings, there were 951 contracts signed. And what I wanted to try to do was to take that, do a little cut and paste, add some columns, and take a look at previous year's Major League stats. And I say Major League stats because that's what's important. and compare that to the contract stats. So in other words, I just took the year before. I didn't take the 5 years before or the 3 years before. I just took the previous year, and then compared it. If it was a 3-year contract, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, compared those stats to that contract period. And if the period hadn't, the contract hadn't been completed yet, I would indicate in the last column the number of years it had been completed so far. So the stats that I looked at the old historical stats and some of the new stats. I'll call them the sabermetric type stats. So I did, for position players, I did home runs, RBIs, batting average. And then I also showed OPS, which is, of course, a combination of slugging and on-base percentage. So I figured those two combined would give me a good indicator. I decided not to use WAR because WAR sometimes, my interpretation is it's a cumulative type stat during a given year, and sometimes with players being injured or like COVID seasons, WAR may not give me a true accurate approach of stats to compare against. So that's why I decided to go with the OPS. Right or wrong, it was just my way of doing it. So it's showing objective data. And then what I was doing of these 951 contracts, I would make a subjective assignment of their performance. And whether that performance was much more productive, slightly more productive, equal productive, and then slightly less, or much less productive than the year before. And I did not include international signings such as the Rusney Casilla, Yosemite Tomas, Kenya Johima, only because they would not have had previous year major league stats. They might have had, some minor league stats, but again, I was trying to make this as pure as I could. So I left off international signings for now, because there have been a few good ones and a few bad ones. Time lost to injury, released, retired prior to contract completion did affect the productivity and performance rating that I assigned. In other words, if they only played 3 or 4 years, that would affect their performance because they were paid for 4 years. This isn't like the NFL where, sometimes players don't have the guarantee money for the entire contract. Of course, if they were injured, then that is something entirely different. The COVID year, for those that had contracts in 2020, it made it a little bit different to try to do the analysis. And I tried to extrapolate in my mind subjectively how maybe that season would have played out. And I didn't, I certainly didn't take away just because their home runs, RBIs were down, or their one loss ERA was down. And by the way, for pitchers, I did wins, losses, ERA, as well as WHIP. So WHIP is the sabermetric pitcher and stat that I use to combine with the wins, losses, and the ERA. So I'm going down that the productivity performance rating is not directly related to the dollar size or length of the contract. I was trying to look at it purely from a statistical and number of years that they actually played and performed. Let's see, I'm going to, if you want to look at this,
Do you want me to
I can
go anywhere? So
Yeah.
I think we got the hang of the spreadsheet and what it is, and we, so if you want me to switch over to the presentation, I can do that.
Yeah, if you want to just go down to page 3, because I've already just done the pre-analysis comments, or the abstract overview. If you want to do page 3, which is pre-analysis comments,
This?
and I'm going to go through this because
The
it's easier.
presentation?
Yes, on
Okay.
the PowerPoint, if you
What I'm
would, please,
sharing.
Chris.
Just one second. I gotta switch what I'm sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Let's hope I got this right. There we go. Page 1. You can see this, right?
I can.
Everyone see it?
Yes. Yes.
So this was his explanation, and this is the page 3.
So,
Why don't you, Chris,
excuse me?
why don't you go to slideshow?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
okay.
Go ahead.
So in general, the pro and college sports, as I mentioned, have become a lot more expensive and events to attend the last 30 years. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I would even say that would pertain to the minor leagues and the prices that we pay to go to those games. But my fundamental premise when offering large contracts is that they are more likely to see much less productivity than much more. Otherwise, why would major league teams offer large contracts in the first place?
They are more likely to see much less product than much more otherwise. Do you mean that the other way?
Pardon me?
The fundamental premise when offering large contracts, they are more likely to see much less productivity than much more.
Yes.
Otherwise, why would they large contracts be offered in the first place?
Exactly. That's my thought is, if they're signing these large contracts, they're based on players that have performed well to begin with. And to expect them to perform at a much higher productivity level is not really realistic. I think they're saying, if I sign this player and they were roughly equal to where they have been in the year before, the years before, then we're going to get our money out of this contract. If these players fulfill these performance criteria that we would expect from them. So that's why I was saying is, if you get a guy that's given a 5-year contract, $100 million, I don't think it's based on them thinking, well, they're going to, they should already be performing at a high level to get that contract. I guess that's really what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Okay. Maybe I should have worded it a little bit differently. Why disregard a player's previous season's poor stats in favor of earlier year stats when offering large contracts? Is it an anomaly or a red flag? And a lot of times teams will offer these large contracts and disregard maybe the previous year and just say, well, that was an anomaly. We're gonna roll the dice and we're gonna pay based on the 3 or 4 years prior to that. And my point here is, there's a reason why they perform at that level. Is it because they're deteriorating as a player, their skills? That it shouldn't just be disregarded, and the contracts being awarded should always be based on not taking all statistical factors into play. And that's one of my points here. And as one can look at some of these stats, there's some really marginal decisions that have been made over the years about these large contracts. And one has to wonder why they do it based on maybe an already deterioration of the statistics. And I'll point out a few of them when I go through this, like Albert Pujols. Had he ever had a year any better than his worst year with the St. Louis Cardinals? And yet he got incredible money for the last 10 years. And one has to wonder, okay, why do that? Why pay that kind of money? Because we as fans, and I say fans, not as SABRites, but as fans, we pay for that. And I have a concern that baseball has become, and all pro sports for that matter, have become unaffordable because some of these large contracts. And that's what I'm trying to detail here with the number of ones that really have not panned out. So that's why I say you can't just disregard a player's previous season's stats in favor of years before that, because there's something to that. Inflation has gone up 93% from 1991 through 2020 combined, 93%. While top 30 Major League Baseball average annual contracts have increased 684%. Average ticket prices from 1991 to 2019 have been up 285%. And I give you an indicate there, and there's the statistical or the source reference that used to gain that information. Average attendance actually has pretty much remained the same from 91 through 2019. And of course, I didn't use 2020 because of the COVID season and nobody went. But average payroll went from 23, a little over, or 23.5 million to a little over 133 million per team. Quite significant. Do fewer individuals, families attend games while more season ticket holders kept 2019 average attendance close to the 1991 numbers? I don't know that, but I'm guessing that has a lot to do with it, because I can't imagine in the days that I used to, when I lived in Southern Pennsylvania, I went down to Baltimore Oriole games. We used to go to quite a few games a year. And I remember, as late as like 72, 73 box seats around the dugout being $4. We used to go many, many times. And of course, in this day and age, for the average family, the cost, for four to go to a game, what, $300-400, maybe more, depending upon the tickets they purchase and the concessions that they buy. And I wonder, is that attendance that has stayed close to 27, 28,000 over the last 30 years? Is it because there are more season ticket holders as opposed to the average fan going as often as they did 30 years ago, or even 40 or 50 years ago? Just a point that I'm trying to bring up.
Hey, Dave, it sounds like you're kind of speculating on that point. Do you know, is there any entity, I mean, there probably is internally, but is it available, that like kind of studies the demographics of fans? Is it more business people? Is it more families? Like, is there people out there who do that?
Yeah, that's one of the, that's why I put a question mark after it, because that is one area that I could not find data. I'm sure it's out there, and
Teams
if I
have to
dug,
look at that, but
yeah, pardon me?
I said the teams must look at that, but I just
yeah,
wondered if it's available, but maybe not.
But I throw that out there, and each of you know your own individual situation. And of course, here in North Carolina, we don't have any Major League Baseball teams, so those that live closer to Raleigh, I don't know if you go to Atlanta or go to Washington or Baltimore, but would you go to more games or less games today because of where ticket prices are, concession prices, parking, and so forth? That's why, again, I put the question mark after that. Okay, I'm going to go right to the
skip the next slide.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Just go beep, like when the old days when you watched some film strip in the elementary school.
What's that?
When you want me to change the slide, you beep, like in the slides. And kids have there you go, exactly like that.
So when I look at these 951 contracts and I break them down, that is what I get here. And that is, you have 256, let's just say 27% are much less productive, 25% are less productive, 16% slightly less. So I take those three categories and I basically say, and again, I know it's my classification. One of these 7 classifications is a subjective thing, looking at the objective stats. So one of you could look at it and say, well, I'm not sure it's much less. It may be less, which would be fair. So I just tried to put as much time as I could analyzing each line item and say, okay, this is where I think it would be. But the bottom line here is that over 3/4 of the contracts are much less productive, are less productive overall. And like I said, of the ones that are actually more productive, you're basically dealing with 16 or 17%. And I think that's significant. But as I stated in one of my previous slides, is that I really believe that they're not looking, when they're signing these contracts, these large contracts. And again, I say, when I do these 951 contracts, there was 900 that were from the COTS analysis. And I failed to say this on the front end, but I took the top 30 in dollar contracts for each of the last 30 years. I didn't do every contract. I just took the top $30 contracts. And that's what's part of this analysis. So, while I would expect to have more or less productive contracts than more productive contracts, I didn't expect it to be over 2/3.
Hey,
To be
Dave,
less productive.
one interesting thing on this slide is if you put it in baseball terms, this says the GMs have a batting average of 316 on their contracts, which, if you think of it as a batter, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely, and obviously there's a bunch more slides, so it'll be interesting. Oh,
Would you look at that as a batting average from a GM standpoint? Would a GM think of it that way? Because I know if
I don't know. I'm just looking at, you got 2/3 where you're less. That means you got a third, almost a third where you're equal or better. Maybe that's, I don't know from a GM's perspective what you think is good or not, but you could say, well, hey, I went 1 for 3. I'm pretty good.
Well, there is a GM section. The only way I could address that is when I was in the business world, as in working for a company here in the business office, if I made 1/3 of my decisions were right and 2/3 were wrong, I wouldn't be in that position at all. more than a short period of time. So
Dave, this is Gary. That I think the other thing that needs to factor in, it's about the numbers and it's about productivity, but there's a big piece that says what kind of revenue is this going to drive. So if I sign Albert Pujols, if he's not at the end of the day, it's a financial game, right? And yeah, you win, you do better. But if you sign big time players, you get more interest, more fans, more contracts, more TV, more media. And that's been true forever. I mean, why would the Braves have signed Babe Ruth at the end of his career, right? I mean, so I think it's not just about whether the player is productive or not. And I think that might be why I'll use this term, don't care that the player isn't as productive. The question is how much more revenue and how much more profit is signing the player going to drive to the club? I think that's the factor that really the GM cares about. At the end of the day, the ownership cares about, right? And if they win, that's great. But if they can be profitable and not win, like the Yankees have been, that's okay, right? Because you're a business. That's my 2 cents.
Right. No doubt about it. No doubt about it is how much more does it bring in? And that's why I asked that question on the previous slide of, is it better today for the fan, the average fan? Or is it better for the season ticket? Are there more season ticket holders that are taking over who's coming to the games, and it actually benefiting from that added cost? I mean, as fans, we could say we're sports page fans as opposed to actually attending baseball games, and there's something to be said for that. That your team signs a certain player, and you go, all right, this is really going to improve my team. Okay, but is it worth it? Is it worth them spending that kind of money? Is the inflation of baseball or football or basketball, whatever the sport, is it worth it in this world to be paying this kind of money? That's one of the things I'm trying to bring out here. But your point is well taken. It's a matter of what's the average fan thinking about stuff like this too.
Dave, excuse me, this is Keith. My question is, on these contracts, how many of them were first contracts before guys were 27, and how many of them were second contracts after 30? Because I know, because contracts have a lag behind performance, and I think players peak around age 30. And so if you sign a guy when he's 25, he should grow and increase. But if you're signing him at age 30, he's already on the downward spiral. And how many of these, when you looked at them, were you able to figure out when they signed and if they were first or seconds on the contracts?
Yeah, that's in my presentation.
Let me jump in. Right. That's what I want to say. So let's let Dave get through it. Everybody write down your questions so that we can come back to him. So Keith, yeah, and you can see on his spreadsheet, he had the age of the contract. So I don't know how much he dug into it, but definitely he does have the data. So that's certainly something maybe he can circle back if he didn't have a lot on it. But let's, I appreciate all those questions, but I do want to make sure that he gets all the way through the presentation and we can get to Keith. All right.
It is a
It's an exciting topic, right?
Yeah, it's depending upon what side one may be on. I mean, from a player standpoint, from a general manager standpoint, clearly this isn't something they'd want to see. So the next slide just has to do with the contract length and the lower productivity percentage of 6-year plus. 79% were lower productive contracts. And as you can see, 5 years was basically the same. 4 years was about 2/3. 3 years, about 76%. And then when you get down to 1 year contracts, again, this is the top 30 each year of the last 30 years, plus the large contract extensions. So even with the 1 year one, there were about 54% that were lower productivity. Okay, next slide.
I can go again if you need me to go again. This is just more information about where they were.
Okay, contract size. I'm gonna read through a couple of these if you don't mind me doing so.
No, please.
Of the 617 total contracts under 25 million, 408 were less, 60, almost 2/3 were less productive. 25 million plus contracts, over 70% were less productive. And then as you go down, all the way down to, contracts, 173 of the 951 contracts were 5 million to 10 million. But yeah, they're still close to 2/3, and you'd have to get down to the ones that are less than 2 million, where you would see a significant drop in the productivity of the player. But again, it's kind of taking all the data and just looking at it and slicing it a couple different ways. Next slide, Chris, please.
Certainly.
And to your question about age, there are a few contracts in here, and I'd have to open up the spreadsheet again. Alex Rodriguez is one of them. I think Ryan Howard is another. Pujols, and I'd have to think about which ones have more than one contract. But I think this is pretty interesting that there really wasn't a big difference, again, of these large contracts, and this does not take into consideration, smaller contracts each year, other than, just the top 30. But of the top 30, which is the larger ones, roughly, you can pretty much see it kind of hovers around that 2/3 area of lower productivity, whether they're less than 30 or 38 or older. I found that to be a real interesting fact that I did not expect to see.
David, you said this particular slide only applies to the 30 largest contracts. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, of each year.
Of each year. Got it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other contracts. Yeah, this thing could just gotten really big if I would have done all the contracts. And I really wanted to focus on the big dollar ones, because that was my biggest concern coming into the research. So that's the age one. Next slide, please. Of the 90 contracts that were 100 million or more, 3/4 of them had lower productivity. Interestingly, of the top 15 signed from 91 to 20, only 2 of the players' teams made the playoffs in the first contract year, and that's all I looked at. Again, you can add all kinds of variables to this thing, but I said, okay, they signed the contract. That would be the first year of their contract. Let's see how many made the playoffs. And I do have another slide here talking about some of the Yeah, oh, there, it's right there, right below it. Of the top 50, only 15 made the playoffs. So you had 15 of 50 in their first year of contract. I think that's, that's not what not what one would expect. And of the 951 contracts, only 37% led their team to the playoffs in the first year of the contract. I don't think that's what GMs look for. And again, it's just one player of amongst 25 now, 26 players on a team, but that one player is making a lot of dollars, and they make up a great portion of that team salary. So one would hope that if they're making up that percent of the team salary, that there'd be a higher percentage of players or teams that would make the playoffs. Of the 951 contracts, 49% were pitchers. Excuse me, I think I'm sorry. I think I might have, yeah, I think the pitchers were a little bit less than that. And I think I have my percentage there. I just have to look at that. But anyway, let me, of the 256 pitchers that were much less productive performance, sorry guys, I'm bear with me. Let me get my facts straight here in my mind.
Don't worry.
Fortunately, this isn't a national audience.
That's correct. Just relax. It's fine.
Okay.
Don't worry. We all do it. Get yourself settled.
Yeah, they're saying, what I'm saying is 57% of the contracts were pitchers, suggesting that pitchers were more of a gamble in large contracts than position players. Let me, I can't, there's something I'm missing on that, and I think I have it wrong. So
the way I read it is, if you got your percentages right, it's saying about half the contracts are pitchers, but 57% of the less productive were pitchers, meaning the pitchers were even though the contracts are about even between pitchers and non-pitchers, the fail rate, if you will, was higher for pitchers. So I think that's the point you're making. Whether the percentages are exactly right, I don't know. But
yeah, I think that was the point I was making. I'm just looking at the fact that I thought there was the first percentage was a little bit different, but that was the point I made about which ones were a little bit more of a gamble. Okay, next slide, please. These are the ones that I pulled that were 3+ year contracts, where there actually was an improvement. And I won't say they were equal or slightly. These are ones that actually saw a significant improvement. And I actually put their ages in there. You can see that, some of them were under 30 or younger. I think there's at least half of them there. So to the point about age, definitely plays a factor. There's some guys in there that had some really, really good and bad years in their major league career, but for the sake of this analysis, these are the ones that I pulled from the large contracts that actually panned out well.
Yeah, one question on that list, just looking at the Ellis Burks one, obviously you got the Rockies, so you'd expect to see stats improve probably when he goes to Colorado.
Oh
yeah. Did you do any sort of, I guess, consideration of the moving to Colorado thing, or not really?
I'm trying to think. I'd have to go look and sort by Rockies, and I can do that on my spreadsheet. And maybe I can, as we're talking here, let me take my. Let me just take my spreadsheet here, do my sort.
But having said, the rest of these kind of make sense because you see teams that, advance in the postseason or whatever during those times that they had these players.
Yeah, let me. I'd have to take, I need to do a different sort here.
And only just noting, look at the dates of the contracts, right? Only one is 2008. There's only a few in 2000 or later, which
Dude,
says
they
that
are
more
all
recently
earlier.
it's
Yeah.
been less successful, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's I have to see if Colorado, I'd have to do a little bit more investigating here if Colorado is a lot worse than any other team. But certainly as I'm looking at this thing, there were some successes, but there was also a lot of misses. Going to Colorado, Tulowitzki, of course, Hampton, Wade Davis, Danny Nagel, Brian Shaw, Darryl Kyle, Mike Dunn, Bill Swift. I mean, you can probably go down. These are all ones that had much less productivity. Brian Bohannon, I think Bill Swift, Jerry DePoto. Even Larry Walker, had a pretty poor 4-year contract himself that he signed in 1995. So I don't know off the top of my head here, without looking at every team, which one was worse. But I did do some team analysis at the end, maybe not exactly the way you're looking at it, which is a good point. But I do have something at the end that'll kind of bring that in too.
That's fine. And in the interim, I did look it up. Burks had one monster season at the end of that contract, which probably helped the overall analysis too. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is that, it can be, stats can be swayed. You have to, how do you put some value? Do you put a statistical value on 1 year versus the other years on the contract? Because I did an average, if guys had 5-year contracts, it would be a 5-year average that I would compare to the year before. Again, there's everyone on this call could look at this analysis and do it their own way. It was my way of just doing and not making it a 3-year project.
Yeah,
but doing
that makes sense.
Just to do a snapshot here of, what my point was in the first place to try to do this thing. The next one are the worst 3+ year contracts, and there's a lot more. And this is, I mentioned there in red, those that are highlighted in red. If you look down at the bottom, there was a article, it's called Joe Anderson's Net Worth 101, Worst Contract Bust in Major League History. So his top 25, the ones that are in red are ones that I would agree. He had some international players in there also. And he also had some that were 2 years and 1 year contracts that, again, I was just looking, when I did this one, I just said, let's just make it 3 years plus. And just for this page, these last 2 pages. Although in my analysis, I did have contracts that were 1 and 2 years, but for the sake of these 3 pages here of the worst and the best, I just focused on 3 years and larger contracts. So those are the ones that I came up with. I'm sure each one of you can remember multiple contracts and know how badly or how well certain guys played. So, and I have another one. I think the next page continues. I have them alphabetically here. So I'm not rating them. I don't even know if I want to get into that. It gets to be a little bit, too arbitrary and too subjective, based on the stats and the years and the dollar amount and so forth. So I just kind of put the top ones in here that I thought were, that I classified as much less productive compared to the previous year of their contract. Okay, slide 12, Chris, is this has to do with team operations and general managers productivity. Again, I just did a little formula. So total signings divided by number of less productive. I can get into this formula here, but bottom line here, without doing all that math, as you can see, the hit rate on some of these top 10 wasn't too bad. So if you compare the percentage that I had at the end there, Alex Athanopoulos, basically I give this value 0.25 without getting into all the details of how I got to it, is much better than the worst one, which is Andy MacPhail. So you may say, okay, well, yeah, but Andy MacPhail has done a lot of good things in baseball. Very true. This thing has to do with contracts and the productivity of those contracts and the players that they signed. So if they did a great job scouting and developing players, I mean, that's also a huge part of a general manager's job. But strictly looking at signings, these are the top 10 best ones that I came up with based on all the players that they signed. And it had to be at least 5 or more that they signed or were involved, even if it was a joint signing with somebody else. And then the 10 worst.
I would like to congratulate the Orioles for having 3 GMs on the worst GM list. Way to go, Baltimore. 30 years, 3 of the worst GMs.
How many championships have the Orioles won in the last 30 years again?
It's somewhat related, I suspect.
Yeah, that's right. So there might be some correlation here.
Well, one person I'm surprised not to see anywhere is Billy Beane.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Oakland A fan, and I was really curious to see where, Billy Beane was pretty much, I mean, if you look at, I can tell you where Billy Beane was.
Probably in the middle given this list.
Yeah, so you can see here's the top 10. The last number there is say 0.7, and then the 10 worst is 1.3. I can tell you Billy Beane was where are we at?
One is 40.
He was 1.262. So where does that put him? Pretty close to the 10 worst. So, here we are. Here's Billy Beane, the very frugal general manager, but he's had some difficult signings, no doubt about it. And as I went through that list, I remember so many of them myself. I mean, there's a few of them that really stick out, but he's definitely in the bottom 50% than the top 50%. So, and I just limited here to the top 10 and the worst 10. So maybe best and worst isn't really, I should have just said maybe something else other than that, but because these guys in their own right may be great GMs from a overall standpoint.
I did want to say that to Jeff's earlier point, 3 of the top 5 teams are known for having launching pad ballparks.
Yeah, it's an interesting point.
The other 2 teams are known for having extremely stable general managers. The Royals and the Cardinals.
And to your launching pad point, look at the bottom at Seattle, right?
Yeah. And the Jays and the White Sox and the Indians and the Nats and the Mets. So that none of that is surprising. It's good. It's good. When you do analysis, you want to have a few surprises, but you don't want everything to be like, that doesn't make any sense. So,
or if that's your answer, then probably you did something wrong.
Yeah. All right. The last slide.
Yeah, as we move it on here, this is slide 13. This is just, again, this is just the signings of the baseball teams. It has nothing to do with how teams did as a total roster. But this is taking overall team future productivity rank, team's total number of players either signed or let go as free agents, and that first column is that total of the 951. Hopefully that would add up to 951. And then I go, then best to worst rank of percentage of number not re-signed divided by the number of productive, plus the best to worst rank of percentage of number re-signed as opposed to not re-signed divided by the non-productive. Again, it was a formula I was trying to come up with that could showcase by team how they performed in these large contracts. Again, how much weight do you put to it? I don't know, but I thought there might be a question. I thought it might be a good slide to put on there. So you can see
Very interesting. It's very interesting.
best to worst.
Hey, Dave, just on that sort of point, did you just analyze just kind of raw data when you had sort of your, I guess your much less productive or your sort of your worst contracts? How many of those were re-signs versus how many of those were, market signs? Did you look at that at all?
Yeah, there was only, of the re-signs, there was only 51.
Okay. Most of the big contracts are going somewhere else. Yeah.
Yes, there were only 51, and I only took the top 50 roughly.
Yeah.
It was another, and I forget what website I used for that. But I wanted to make sure I had some representation of the re-signs in there also.
Yeah, and when we were looking at his opening spreadsheet, and if you just think about who the re-signs are, Mariano Rivera was on his list, Derek Jeter, A-Rod re-signing with the Yankees. So the Yankees re-sign the free agents, and we kind of have a feel for who re-signs their big free agents and who goes, no thanks.
Yeah, too expensive.
Right. So the Yankees are heavily on that list, and they fall right in the meaty part of the curve here. And the Braves are also in who are at the top, but they pick and choose correctly. That's one of the things that they do well. The Cardinals have done well in the sense that they trade for a free agent and then they sign them, right? And they've done well at that. So those are really the two that I think of when I think of who re-signed their own free agents successfully. Those are the ones that were pretty good at it.
Yeah, I just looked at my my scratch notes that I had here on the re-signs. I think I only had eight of the 51 were much less productive. So I think the re-signs were definitely a better situation.
So that implies that teams are pretty good at knowing when they've squeezed what they're going to get out of that guy, and they're better off letting someone else overpay him.
Well, the teams that signed those 51.
Yeah.
Those teams.
That's what this slide is saying, is telling us here, is that these are the ones that, okay, which ones did we just say, okay, we're just not interested. So on the actual Excel spreadsheet, it has a column for the previous team and then the new team. So you can that's where I was able to gather the information. And then I combined the two, re-signing, not re-signing, and who had the best combined ranking. And again, it was my way of calculating it, just so we had some kind of a snapshot of roughly how some of these teams did collectively.
All right.
So anyways, again, it's SABR type stuff, and it's not necessarily what everybody would do, or even, one other person besides myself, but it was just trying to take a look at these contracts and where they've gone, and, how successful have they been over the years. So, and I thought 30 years was a good snapshot of time to evaluate it. So if I go into my last slide, which is my summary and suggestion, my personal summary and suggestion, I said organization and general manager rankings are based solely on this free agent extension and not on organization drafting and development. And that's a real important point here, because I don't want to be shooting holes at these GMs just because of what they've done with contracts, or what appears to be done in contracts. The data strongly suggests large contracts, long or short, have a high probability to not be economically worthwhile from a fan perspective, not necessarily to the point that was brought up earlier about how much revenue. Obviously, teams have, if you take a look at revenue, which I did not do in this thing, how teams have done over the years. I mean, certainly you could make the point about should there be caps? Should there, like they have in all the three other major league sports? and get away from luxury taxes and stuff like that. You know, everybody has their opinion on something like that, but certainly there's some teams that make a lot more than others. They're in larger markets, bigger TV contracts. And then you have the small market teams that, you know, like Tampa Bay making to the World Series last year with the payroll that they had, Oakland A's, you know, over the last few years. So I'm just making a general comment there. Is it, you know, is it economically worthwhile? And so why do these contracts continue to be offered in much higher dollars and longer terms? I still would ask that question. Why are they giving, why do teams give out 10-year contracts? I don't understand. I don't care what they bring in. It, you know, were people still coming to Los Angeles Angel games the last 5 years to see Albert Pujols, or were they coming because of somebody else? Or if Mike Trout wasn't there, would they still come to see Albert Pujols, you know, in the declining years of his career, but yet still making whatever, $30 million a year? It's just a comment that I throw out there that, you know, it can be debated a lot of different ways. Is it any different than trading prospects for one-third year rentals in July, since only one team can win the World Series? If no teams do it, every team is better off and the game is more affordable for more fans. And I look at this from a fan perspective, not from a profitability standpoint. I'm looking at it from a fan perspective, because that's where baseball, to me, that's where it belongs. It belongs to the fans. It's a business, but it's the fans that either make or break the sports. And, you know, as a baseball follower, I don't care if I'm an Oakland A fan or a New York Yankee. I sometimes wonder, whether it's worth signing these contracts and committing so many dollars, or trading away all these prospects for a 1/3 of the year rental, and then not winning it, because only one team can win. And if everybody's doing it, then everybody's just raising the bar. Nobody's getting any better because everybody else is getting better. It's my opinion, I guess. Can one assume large contracts cause more players to be placed on injured reserve to protect team investments? I have an opinion on that, of course. I think that's very true in this day and age. Can one also assume large contracts de-incentivize some players? The lower budget teams are more effective, given no Major League Baseball salary cap, yet regardless of the sport, it is the fans that ultimately lose. Remove the luxury, this is my suggestion, remove the luxury tax, implement a team salary cap, indexed to inflation, and not an artificial supply and demand factor based on attendance numbers, season ticket holders, which penalize the average fan base. Now, I did not have the data on season ticket holders. And again, this suggestion is made amongst 12 or 13 of us and not to a whole national audience, but it's just my thoughts on contracts. And obviously I tried not to have my opinion, my predetermined opinion, affect how I rated the productivity. And I went through them a couple of times and changed a couple of them, to make sure that it was reasonable and based on the objective stats. But the data came out the way it did. So that is my research, ladies and gentlemen. And I appreciate sharing it. Hopefully there's some eye-opening information here that you didn't realize, or maybe already did. And if either one of you want to see the Excel spreadsheet or this PowerPoint, be happy to send it to you. I'm not submitting it anywhere else for written publication like that. So
it's really good. I mean, I don't know if you do go to the conventions, but this is really good. It's very interesting. I really do appreciate it. And I thought it was open. It certainly asks a lot of very interesting questions. And because I quelled it, Keith was in the middle of a question when I said, but no, he did cover the age point after that. So questions for Dave? Obviously, I have a couple, but I'll go last.
Dave, I just thought I'd bring out to all of us that there's an article, or there was an article in the fall 2019 edition of Baseball Research Journal by a fellow named Barry Krisoff, who's a professor of economics up at the University of Maryland, that we might find interesting because he used a different methodology. His actual name, the title of the article is Rating Baseball Agencies such as Scott Boras's, and how successful each of the agencies were in handling the free agent situations and getting the best deals for the players. And that article, as I say, was in the 2019 Baseball Research Journal. And I bring it up because his methodology is different from yours, Dave. And some of the things that I just like to quote a couple of sentences. One thing, the methodology definitely is different, is that he used the WAR as the determinant, really, not the statistics that you use.
Right.
And he came out with the conclusion that WAR outcomes over a term of a contract are consistently lower than prior to the contracts. And he says, quote, "This is an expected result, particularly for free agents, since these players are older and their performances tend to drop off with age," which I think you said you found was not true.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
if I did WAR, it could very easily have been exactly what this gentleman indicated. And that might be a better way of doing it. I just elected to try to do the two other stats.
yeah,
His methodology, in fact, he went into much more depth than he did, apparently, in this article. But when I saw you were going to speak, I pulled it out and read it again just to the thing. He also found that it was really better deals for the clubs if they signed players who had to 2-year short-term contracts.
Right. I would most definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So I'll take a peek at that.
Yes, as I said, his purpose really was rating these agencies. Like I didn't realize there were so many of them. You always hear about Scott Boras, but there, must have been a dozen of them here.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that, Francis.
Yeah, and the other thing I thought I might mention is that he said coming to terms with, he calls them team control 2 players, that is ones who have 2-year contracts or so, for multi-year contracts relative to free agents appears to be advantageous for the teams. And the other thing I thought, and this is somewhat related, I think, to this topic of who the good deals would be, so to speak, in free agency. Again, not my opinion, but Mike Gimbel, who some of you may recognize as a former consultant to the general managers of the Expos and the Red Sox back in the 90s, who I think had a mixed reputation as a sabermetrician. But I heard him on one of these Zoom meetings back in March, and he said that hitters most often have significant improvement at age 24 or beyond, and pitchers generally improve before the age of 24 and then reach a plateau. And I would think that might play into, if you're analyzing what a prospective deal might be for a free agent, if those facts are true, then that might be something interesting to look at. But I appreciate your presentation, Dave. I think it was really good. Certainly, you put a lot of work into it, obviously. And,
they're always fun. I always enjoy doing these.
Thank you. I just thought I'd share those things, particularly that article. And as I say again, probably for the third time, it's in the Baseball Research Journal, fall of 2019.
And I wrote it down here.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yes, uh-huh.
Hey, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Years ago, I actually participated in a SABR analytics convention in Phoenix, and the question was Mike Trout's salary, and our analysis is actually all based on WAR, and the advantage of WAR is that you can actually relate it back to dollars and wins. But one of the things that we noticed with Mike, with WAR, what we did for everyone that we could find is it helped get better numbers on the margin. And what we noticed with everyone, actually, the only one who increased with WAR over age was Barry Bonds, for some obvious reasons. But WAR seems to be a lot better methodology when you calculate everything out, because it gives a better kind of cumulative number. And at the same time, you can then relate WAR back to team revenues too. So, but when we looked at it, one of the things that we were looking at is the difference between the first contract and the second contract, and that makes a huge difference. But also, our general conclusions were a lot like yours, that contracts lag behind player performance. So you're getting paid really for last year's success in next year's salary.
Right.
And that was the big thing we noticed. And the other big thing was the other thing with teams, players are under control for 5 years, I believe, and so that makes a huge difference too in like the first year signing and then that bonus signing. So you see a lot of teams holding guys back for the first month of the year so they can get that extra season out of them. That we noticed, especially, I think the Yankees did that with Aaron Judge too. They kept them, and some other players will keep guys back till the middle of May, so their service year time clock doesn't start with the beginning of the season. So that kind of comes into play too. And then when they sign their first contract, so if they come in at 22 in the third, then it's 28 when they sign their first contract or something like that. So it's and that would be the other thing that I don't know if you could look at when you're doing your research is that as well, like the first contract, second contract, and then if they sign a contract when they're in their 5 years of club control, that makes a huge difference too.
Good points. Good point. I really vacillated on the whole OPS wars type thing, whether I wanted to use one versus the other. And like I said, I understand that the importance of WAR in today's statistics and contracts and so forth. So good point. Thank you.
If I can find that, I'll send it to you. We did it before I had gray hair. So but I have it somewhere, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if
because we tracked that. It turned out when we tracked Mike Trout, he was on the same trajectory as Ted Williams. So we figured that no matter what you paid him, it was not enough.
That was terrific. Does anybody else have a burning question? Dave, I really enjoyed it. It was terrific. It really does got a lot more questions than ask Keith and Francis both highlight of what else we could do to tweak it. Doesn't matter if we do this, doesn't matter if we do that. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And everyone should kind of thank Dave. I know we've been trying to get it definitely on the schedule, but Dave Pinion said, I got my presentation polished and I said, okay, let's do it this weekend. So it worked out.
Yeah. Thanks for the forum.
No. Anytime. Keith can tell you anytime. So that was really terrific. And we can certainly, his email is if you go to the SABR site, you can go and email, you can use the directory and send an email to Dave if you have other follow-up questions that you want. And obviously, since he'll come to our meetings, we can always jump back into this discussion. We do want to move on. Dave, thanks. That was absolutely terrific.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I can stay on till about 3:30. Thank you.
Yeah, and don't worry about that. A lot of people always have something come up. I mean, people, it's always, we actually, I feel bad. We have like the longest meeting. If you go and you look, like most people, an hour, we have like a 3-hour meeting because we don't get to see each other as often. And almost always we have great presenters. Thank you, Dave. And
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
And so we'll continue with that. And I will, I think the first in-person meeting will probably be closer to the All-Star game than before the All-Star game. But I'll definitely look, when the restaurants cut it, really say, all right, that's enough. People that don't want to get the vaccine, just go ahead and get COVID. So I guess that's where we're headed at this point. I hope you will all get the vaccine. It is safe. It is the correct thing to do. Just like polio, get the vaccine. Then we'll have that. Now, next up, Keith has a presentation on the Lackawanna League, which certainly if you enjoy older baseball, Keith, it brings, I will say, I hope you have a seatbelt on your chair because Keith is going to, haven't seen this presentation, but I promise you, your jaw is going to hit the floor at some point during this presentation. All right, Keith, take it away.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to get a refill, so bear with me.
Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes. I don't know if everyone can. I can speak for me. I can.
Yeah.
It says I'm sharing. Okay, so the Lackawanna League was actually a semi-pro and amateur league in northern New Jersey. It turns out that the president of now Stetson University's father played for one of the teams on the Lackawanna League, and he asked me to do a presentation and do some research on what his dad did. So that was the beginning of this whole thing. So let's see. Okay, so what we're going to look at really, the other thing that's interesting is the Lackawanna League is actually a multi-county league in New Jersey that's named after the Lackawanna Railroad. So it's probably one of the first, which is kind of unique in that sense. But it also gives us a good snapshot of kind of the rise and fall of baseball as a civic institution. And then finally, we'll list kind of the all-stars and heroes in this league. And it's amazing who did not play in the Lackawanna League or had some connection to it. And actually, before the league even got started in 1905, the suburban area of New Jersey was actually one of the hotbeds of baseball, and actually of all things, fiercely contended with over jurisdiction between then Charlie Ebbetson and his Newark team and other cities in New Jersey that wanted to create minor league baseball. And the other issue there was something called the Orange Athletic Club and a ballpark called the Orange Oval. And in the 1890s, just about every major league team on their way to New York would stop and play an in-season exhibition game against this Orange Athletic Club team, which was a semi-pro team, and it had a lot of former ball players on it. And of all things, it had the author Zane Grey as their starting right fielder. But it was a pretty good team and rather well-renowned for its time period. So again, the name Lackawanna League comes from the railroad itself, the Lackawanna Railroad that went from Newark all the way up to Buffalo. And Lackawanna was also famous for having a celebrity spokeswoman named Phoebe Snow, who's actually a cartoon character. She appeared in advertising. One of the secrets of the league was it was actually within 3 hours, or the cities within this league, or 4 hours from half the major leagues at the time period. So from Boston down to Washington, we're all very accessible by train. Again, one of the flagship Negro League teams, the Newark Eagles, were located in Newark. And also the International League, which would have been one of the preeminent minor leagues at the time, were all very close and linked to it as well. So it had proximity. These teams had proximity to the majors, which I think gave it a lot of emphasis. one of the things that we noticed very early on is baseball becomes a civic institution. And I found this as an editorial in one of the town's newspapers, really encouraging the townsfolk that the pride of Madison, New Jersey is on the line, and can citizens buy enough season tickets to assure that their team will actually survive? In fact, we see that they did. And to give you an idea of what we're looking at here is these are basically town all-star teams. And so this diagram here gives us a look at what we're looking. So we've got the red diagram. The top of the pyramid there is what would be called the Lackawanna League teams. And they would play each other, and then they'd also play three other sets of teams. One of them was called the rookie teams, and those were MLB Rookie League teams. The most famous one in this area was actually called the Browns Rookies. And the Browns Rookies were actually run by, of all people, Satchel Paige. And so Satchel would bring his Browns rookie team around, recruiting and playing other teams. They also play a lot of Negro League teams. When the Negro League was at its strength and greatest in the 20s and 30s. And then they'd play a lot of military teams. So when, and especially in the immediate Cold War, post-war era, when all the ball players were drafted, they would go to different, they'd be assigned to different bases and play on their military teams. And so the Lackawanna teams had access to, say, Fort Monmouth, and Whitey Ford and all the other military bases around New York. And one of the interesting things that in the research was that competition for ball players in New Jersey didn't focus just on professionals or semi-pro players, but actually even 12-year-olds like Walter Johnson's son, when Walter Johnson was manager of the Newark Bears, there was a competition between the towns on which Little League would get them. And it turned out that Milburn won out that competition. And then this map, which is pretty patriotic in red, white, and blue, kind of gives us an idea of where all the teams were located over the years. The red ones were the Lackawanna League teams. And the Lackawanna League collapsed in 1950 and then was restructured as the Essex County League, and that lasted till about the mid-1960s. So any team that had a red or blue star would have participated in these leagues at different times. Some of the ones that are most interesting are the team called the Orange Triangles, the Maplewood Maples are one of the older ones, Summit Red Sox, and the East Orange Sovereigns, and the Madison Dodgers, or another big team. And so this gives us an idea of what leagues we're actually talking about here in this time period. So over the last 100 years, there's actually 10 different leagues. They come and go as time would indicate, whether it be World War I, World War II, or actually even the influenza pandemic kept the leagues from existing at different times. So in the beginning parts, they started out all as semi-pro until 1940, and then they switched to amateur leagues, and that amateur league was mainly for college ball players. And so what really separates this league in so many different ways is who they had sponsoring each team in each community. It had unique Major League Baseball connections that are really pretty fascinating. And then I'll show you what a typical season looked like. And again, using the Lackawanna League, you could have gone straight from Broadway to any of the games in less than a half hour, either in 1930, or you could do that today in the exact same way. Again, what really separates this league from all others is the MLB Connections. And first and foremost is George Weiss, who ran the minor league system for the Yankees out of Newark. And with that, he had his scouts highlighting every single high school and college ball player in the Northeast as a friend of the Newark Bears. And so if you hit a couple home runs and you're a high schooler at 18, you get a call or a postcard from George Weiss inviting you down to a free game at Newark Stadium to see the Bears play. And if you were pretty good, you could even get a free season pass for you and your family. At the same time, he also did something unique, and that is he downcycled his Yankee uniforms. And he gave out Yankee uniforms to all these amateur teams. And so he lived in Madison, New Jersey, of all things. And so the team called the Madison Dodgers actually wore old Yankee pinstripes, which is one of those little factoids. And the woman next to him was actually the benefactor and patron of the Madison Dodgers, and she gave the team her name. And that woman there is Geraldine R. Dodge. And if the name sounds sort of familiar, her foundation subsidizes WNET in New York. And so when you ever watch some PBS shows, at the end it'll say the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation. Well, that's her. And the secret of her really is the R in her name stands for Rockefeller. And so she's actually John Rockefeller's youngest daughter. And her husband, Hartley Dodge, actually owned Phillips Dodge Corporation and also Remington Rifle. So she had a lot of money. Some of the games were actually played at a place called Colgate Field in New Jersey, in West Orange. And if that name sounds familiar, that's the same folks who make toothpaste. And then finally, the most interesting patron of the Lackawanna League were the owners of the Giants, especially the Stoneham family. And the Stonehams actually lived in South Orange and sponsored a team called the South Orange Giants and sponsored little leagues throughout the area. And in the late 1920s, this little black and white picture there has Charles Stoneham, and Horace is there as the little kid in the black jacket here in the corner. And they were the best little league team in Essex County at the time. And the best player on the team was a fellow named Eddie Feinstein, which we'll see him, we'll talk about him later. But here's the team. That's Charles, and then that's Horace. And then, of course, we don't know that the Stones are infamous for leaving New York when they did and all that. But what makes the league, again, really special is this is kind of a partial list of who played with the league. And you can see number 1 and 2 on the list in light blue is a guy named Babe Ruse and Lou Gehrig. You might have heard of. Turns out in 1929, they played for the South Orange Giants when the New Jersey semi-pro title was on the line. And one of their Yankee teammates, a guy named Mike Gazzella, actually asked the Babe to play. And Horace Stoneham came up with an extra $100. So Babe got $100 for hitting a home run. And Lou Gehrig got $100 for hitting another home run. And the Babe's home run actually traveled over a tree. And so there's a tree in a park in South Orange, New Jersey that's known as the Babe Ruth tree. And Lou Gehrig's home run went over the railroad tracks and through a window on someone's front door. And so that's the Babe Ruth house.
Was this the beginning of rules against hiring a ringer for your championship game?
No, this is semi-pro baseball. Ringers were allowed. The Babe also pitched an inning and helped the team win. The guys in red are all have baseball reference cards, baseballreference.com slots of some way, name, or shape. And the guys in dark blue were actually the coaches involved. And so one of the things that's really fascinating is you see Richie Autobato, who's a basketball coach. Well, he played baseball, and we see a lot of that in the 20s and 30s and even 40s and 50s, where it was okay to be a 2 or 3 sport star. And as there wasn't a lot of money in basketball at the time, a lot of these guys played baseball to supplement their income before basketball came up. the other thing that's really interesting is of the 5 coaches in blue there, Ron Fraser went on to create a dynasty at the University of Miami. Fred Hill was the coach at Rutgers and won over 1,000 games there. And Mike Shepard won 998 games at Seton Hall. His son is now coach at Seton Hall. His other son is coach at Seton Hall Prep. And his son-in-law is actually the head baseball coach at St. John's. So that one Shepard family has over 2,000 baseball college wins. It's quite remarkable. So when we look at how a typical season would go is the season would start at Memorial Day with a big doubleheader, and that's when all the kids would come back from college for the most part, or it's when the season would start. And it would have been a significant town event, with the mayor coming out, giving the first pitch, as well as anywhere from a few hundred to a few thousand fans showing up. And so this is actually a postcard from one of the games in South Orange, New Jersey. And then in the middle of the season, 4th of July was also another key doubleheader. And I found this little one from Maplewood, in which baseball became the signature event, the crowning event on 4th of July day before the fireworks. And Chris, in case you're looking here, if you notice down, you've got a sack race for 100 yards, a 3-legged race, an obstacle race, and a fat man's race handicap too, just in case. So there's enough races for everybody, so somebody can at least win something.
Which of those races am I in?
Anyone you want. If you want the obstacle race, you can take that.
I'm good. I'm going to leave that alone for right now.
Yeah, you may let it slide on that one. One of the things that was really fascinating that happened, it was very tragic and also rather remarkable. One of the players right after World War II who actually fought in the Battle of the Bulge and fought the Germans in Europe came back and actually slid into second base and broke his ankle. And it was such a bad break that he actually had his leg amputated, which is really horrible. Well, it turned out that it was against Madison, and George Weiss was there and actually offered, the Yankees actually helped this kid, paid some money for his hospital bill, and Joe DiMaggio actually visited him in the hospital with a signed baseball. And the Yankees offered him a golden ticket to come to Yankee Stadium anytime he wanted. As well as the Lackawanna League had a couple benefit games to raise money to help him out. And he ended up, it was quite a touching story about how when he recovered and all that, actually he ended up getting a job with Pfizer Chemical because of it. And then the key thing about the league actually was its All-Star game, which would have brought in over a couple thousand people, as well as all the baseball scouts in the area. And interestingly enough, they'd either play themselves or they'd actually play some Negro League teams as well. And one year the Black Yankees played them and just absolutely crushed them, 14-2, which was pretty common. Whenever they played a Negro League team, usually the Lackawanna teams lost. Again, Major League ball clubs were always looking to hold tryouts, and it turned out that a lot of the scouts actually were umpires. So they had a good idea of who was good and who wasn't good. And one of the first players that actually went from the Lackawanna League right into a ball club was a guy named Al Farmer, who was a catcher for the Dodgers very early on. And then the season kind of culminates at Labor Day with another doubleheader. And so this kind of gives you an idea of the game and the attendance. And this would be a quarter-page newspaper ad in the local newspapers, reminding everybody that it's a donation of 35 cents and come to the game. It's the signature doubleheader. And one of the things that's fascinating is that, again, we see the New Jersey State champions in amateur baseball. Again, the 29 South Orange Giants, courtesy of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. But other teams were Nutley and the South Orange Giants again, and then the East Orange Sovereigns, which really became quite a dynasty as an amateur baseball club. And then the year ends for this with two interesting things, like a good part of the year and a bad part. So the great part of the year, the good part, is the winter banquet, which would be the ultimate winter baseball banquet. And we give, again, I think that's where places like Phil Rizzuto and a guy named Al Schacht, who is known as the crown prince of baseball, would entertain up to a couple thousand people as they give out awards and have, your winter chicken dinner banquet, usually in December for the league. And then at the end of the year, there'd be the reverse of that, the negative, and that would be the end of year league meetings, in which the league, the team presidents would get together and one decide who actually won the Lackawanna League or won the league, or they'd have the unenviable decision about what to do with the teams that weren't doing well. And one of the leagues years that was most interesting was 1938, in the middle of the Depression. Summit first fired their coach because they thought they should have done better. And then after the coach got fired, then they decided to fire the entire team and start all over again. And that, of course, led to the disbandment of the league for a couple years. So the league was very much of a dynamic institution that came and went as economics and as town resources were available. One of the things that's fascinating is that if the team bought Spalding baseballs, the Spalding company would actually provide them a silver trophy. And this is just an example of one. And I want to highlight two interesting things. And, we talk now about how bad it is that people cheat at horse racing. Well, I'm sad to say they've been cheating in baseball for a lot longer. 1905, actually, when the league got started, there was a big debate. Summit lost by a game to Dover, but during the winter meetings, the Summit team complained that the Dover team had used ineligible players, I guess, and Dover lost those by forfeit, and as a result, Summit was the first champion. It turned out that one of the players Dover used was actually a member of the New York Giants at the time, a player named Moose McCormick, who I believe was a pitcher, which kind of helped all that. And then the next year, things got really exciting, and that was what I call the fix of 06. And to look at this chart, we have to understand in August, a month before the end of the season, Chatham had a pretty good lead, and Summit was second, Morristown was third, and Dover was right in the middle at 9-9. Well, a month later, all four teams ended up with a remarkable record of 15-10, sharing the league title, which, of course, one newspaper noted seemed very suspicious. And again, they had a league meeting and they talked about it. And as one person said, almost 90 years later, eventually Morristown admitted that they had cheated. And that's how the league ended in 1906. And actually, there wasn't a league in 1907 because of it. One of the really fascinating things about this league, too, was how baseball was much more local and much more integrated a good 10 years or so before Major League Baseball. The Madison team, which again was, you notice they were all wearing pinstripes, was paid for by Mrs. Dodge, and they were the Madison Dodgers. They bought the best players Mrs. Dodge could find, and so half the team was actually from the Caribbean, either from Puerto Rico or Cuba. And then we have the South Orange team again. This is, 10 years before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, and we can see this team is pretty well integrated with as such. Unfortunately, they actually came in last in the Lackawanna League that year, 36. And then in 1948, the Summit Red Sox, again, were pretty well integrated as well. And what's fascinating is in 1931, the Springfield Stars, which were actually sponsored by the old Tuscan Dairy in New Jersey, signed a woman named Babe Tuscan to play second base for them. So we have one of the first examples of women being paid to play baseball in America. And then kind of the signature team at the end of this league's history was a team called the Maplewood Maples. And one of the things and they were actually a great dynasty at the time. You can see here, they pretty much won every game they played in either the Lackawanna League and then in the Essex County League when it was reorganized. And interestingly enough, the best players all went to Duke because, you know, when you think of New Jersey and Duke, of course, it matters. So there are a couple pitchers and a couple other players from Duke, including the last guy in the back row here. His name was Bob Walkey, and he actually played basketball for Duke when they opened Cameron Indoor Stadium in 1947. But the Maples actually were an amazing dynasty, and this is just a list of some of the players on here. All the ones in red actually made it to the majors, and the best player that we probably know of today from playing in Maplewood is actually Jeff Torborg, who was a catcher for the Dodgers. But he played his summer baseball. He's from New Jersey and played his summer baseball in Maplewood for 2 years. But when we look at Maplewood, when they actually came up against what we call a higher level semi-pro team, they didn't do so well. And it turned out that they played one game against the South Orange Giants, and the pitcher of the Giants was actually a prospect for the Yankees, a guy named Guy Grasso or Ozzie Grasso. And then he shut him out. So, and Ozzie actually, when I talked to him when I was doing this research, was 89 years old and had amazing scrapbooks and living in Vegas. And he said he threw a sidearm and the Yankees wanted to change his motion, and that really hurt his arm, and that was the end of his career. But he played 5 or 6 years in the Yankees minor league system. And also, he was a contemporary of a guy named Bob Hooper, who pitched for the Indians in their glory days in the late 40s and early 50s. And Bob actually lived in South Orange and went to high school there as well. And one of my favorite teams of all is a team called the East Orange Sovereigns. And it was led by none other than Elliot Maddox of the New York Yankees and then later of the Mets. And when I was a little kid, Elliot Maddox was my favorite player. And little did I know that he just played down the street there in East Orange. The team gets its name from a park, and so that's why they're called the Sovereigns. It's actually, they played at their home games in Sovereign Park. And this team that Elliot Maddox was on actually featured the Cubs' first-round draft pick of 1969, a catcher, a guy named Joe Urbanovich, and he's the first one there on the bottom row there. And then just kind of gave their schedule of what they were playing. And this is really kind of the end of the season there. Well, I actually ended up talking to Elliot Maddox about it, and he said it was just a glorious experience of playing in East Orange for those summers. And it really kind of helped him got his career going and helped him get going to get recruited by the University of Michigan, where he played baseball. And then finally, we look at kind of some of the stories of the Lackawanna League as a big idea. And so one of the first things that's really interesting is you could say there's no place like home when it comes to local town baseball. And it's one of these things that's really fascinating, how art and life kind of mimic each other. We have a 1949 cover of the New Yorker magazine of a bucolic suburban setting and someone stealing home. And then 2 years later, we have Monty Irving actually stealing home at Yankee Stadium, of all things. And on the sad side, and really kind of the realistic issue with baseball, we see a huge decline in baseball for a variety of reasons. None is probably more symbolic than what happened at the Orange Oval, where it went from being an epicenter of first in-season Major League Baseball, playing the Orange Athletic Club, to then being kind of the mecca of the Negro Leagues, in which the Newark Eagles would play any team they wanted and could at the Orange Oval to capacity crowds of 3,000 and 4,000 people. And then later, Satchel Paige and his East Orange Browns, which were a rookie team for the Browns doing recruiting, used the East Orange Oval as their home base, recruiting players throughout northern New Jersey. And so Satchel was known to give clinics and then strike out the side at every Saturday afternoon. And again, some of the charts that we might see are very familiar with how kids leave certain sports or as they get older, and actually how we know baseball baseball fans are getting older and maybe wiser, but we're declining. Really, to me, one of the saddest things is when I emailed the East Orange Public Library about information on what do you have on Satchel Paige playing at the East Orange Oval, what do you have on baseball games at the East Orange Oval, given its 100-year history, and they said they had nothing. And I thought that was really kind of emblematic of the issue here of how can we have played baseball 100 years in this historic field and now we know nothing about it today, which is, to me, a real crisis. Yet in some ways, the league still is continuing. They have old timers games and centennial celebrations, and this was from a couple years ago. And there's still a couple guys left, and they still kind of come back every year for kind of reunions. And South Orange has actually created a standing committee with Seton Hall University to come back and play historic baseball or 19th century baseball games there. And also on the positive side, one of the things that's really fascinating when you look at baseball and we understand it is the continuity of the game through different families. And so on the I guess the left of the screen, we see a guy named Bob Winery and Evan Winery. My brother married Bob's niece, so that's why this is a family picture. But it turns out that 1947, Bob was a member of the Maplewood Maples and was playing baseball there for a while. And then we have Evan, who would have been Bob's great nephew or his brother's grandson, actually playing Little League for a team in Texas, and they made it up to Cooperstown to invited for a regional competition there. Interestingly enough, Major League Baseball returned to Sovereign Field in East Orange for the pitch, run, and hit competition. I don't know how well they did that or if they continued since then. And one of the fascinating things, this will make Howard kind of happy here, is maybe it's a trivia question, maybe not, but what do Rick Porcello and Sam Dente have in common? And the answer is Rick is Sam's grandson. So we have a Boston Red Sox Cy Young winner with connections not only to South Orange, but actually to his dad who played in one of the Lackawanna League's teams. So what I'd like to do now is kind of hit the players who played here with some, and it really is a who's who of baseball. One of the more interesting people, one of the most fascinating, was actually Don Nukem, who didn't really play in the Lackawanna League until the end of his career, because he was at the right age to go from high school to the New York Eagles to then get signed by the Dodgers and make it to the majors at the ripe old age of 23. And he actually didn't play in the Lackawanna League teams until 1962, when he was warming up for his one-year stint in Japan. But the town of Madison, Don was actually grew up in Madison, New Jersey, and so when he won the Cy Young rookie in 19, I think it was 19, and yeah, when he was in rookie of the year, the town of Madison gave him the best baseball banquet they could muster.
Yes, 49.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, when he joined the military, when he got drafted, he didn't get drafted in World War II for some reason, even though he was 18. But the Army finally caught him, and they drafted him from 52 to 54. He was out of baseball, and he was playing on a variety of Army teams from Texas all the way to Honolulu. And he actually played with 3 or 4 of the guys from the Madison from the Maplewood Maples, who told me that he would drive around in his Cadillac and was always on the verge of going AWOL and getting in trouble with the sergeants. And his part-time job was beer distributor, which, of course, we know Don had some issues with alcohol. But he was an amazing, they said he was an amazing man and a great ball player. And the best thing they could do is try to keep him sober so the sergeants wouldn't get him in trouble, which is kind of sad. But at the same time, once he sobered up, of course, he's one of the best ambassadors baseball's ever had.
So, side note on that, he didn't get drafted because he wasn't 18 until after the victory over Europe.
Well, it was interesting because he was 1944. So, yeah, so he managed to play.
I'm sorry, I was off.
Yeah, he played Newark for 2 years. And one thing I thought is maybe he was 6'5", and so that got him out because the Army had some very specific height requirements.
Yeah, he's very tall.
Yeah, and I do know that one of my dad's cousins was 6'5", and he ended up in the OSS. Because I think that's where all the tall guys went into the Secret Service. But he was, I don't think a lot of 18-year-olds were eligible to join the OSS either. So we have one Hall of Famer from Seton Hall wearing those really spiffy striped uniforms, Seton Hall style, and that was Craig Biggio. He actually didn't play in any Lackawanna League games. The Lackawanna League was defunct by the time he's there. But he played for the Shepherds and had a career average of only 342 and led. He's the leader in Seton Hall baseball in triples, all-time triples.
I like that he got to wear a Houston Astros jersey in college.
Yeah, that's a smart-looking uniform, isn't it?
Like
his teammate, of all things, was Mo Vaughn. Also, Boston Red Sox fame there, Howard. And, of course, Mo went on to play for the Mets.
Sort of.
And he was the last African-American ball player to wear number 42.
Butch Husky wore number 42. I'm not sure who wore it last, but Butch Husky for the Mets also wore number 42.
I think Mo was the one of the, yeah. Mo was one of the last. At Seton Hall, he was the man, if you will. First in home runs, RBIs, bases on balls, and I calculated his slugging, his OPS, because Seton Hall didn't do that. We don't have hit by bats, but basically he could hit. He could hit better than anyone else in the entire world, but not fielding wasn't that good. So that's why he's the DH. But he was the man, and again, he was wearing those really great striped Seton Hall Pirates uniforms.
Yeah. Also, you're right. Mo Vaughn outlasted Butch Husky. Even though he started before him, he also outlasted him.
Right. And the final Seton Hall player, which we go by the name of Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors, otherwise known as Cubs fans, to Chuck Connors, your first baseman, otherwise known as TV Ryan, that's the rifleman. Turned out he played 2 years at Seton Hall Baseball, was their first baseman, played for the Boston Celtics as well, and I'm not sure which Lackawanna League teams he played in. There seemed to be a couple of issues on which team he played in. Some reports said he played for Madison. Other reports said that he played in South Orange. And then others say that he only played for the Bushwick semi-pro team, which was probably a level above. But as we do know that he was a lifelong Dodger fan, as seen here talking to another left-handed Brooklyn guy. And this gets us to a different little story, and an interesting thing is, who are the little pitching giants? Well, this also could have the title of Why Horace Stoneman Will Never Make It into the Hall of Fame. So, Eddie Feinstein, we saw way back when in one of the early slides when Horace was just a little kid, and Eddie was the #1 pitcher on their Little League team that won the Essex County tournament in the mid-20s. Well, it turned out he was a pretty good pitcher, and he got signed by the Yankees, and then got sent out to Binghamton, and then the Phillies picked up his contract. He hurt his arm, and then the Braves picked up his contract again. And Eddie Feinstein is in the record book in baseball for having one of the greatest game score differentials between his first start and his second start. And it turned out that his first major league start was a 3-hitter against the New York Giants, of all teams. His Little League coach's team, he beats them, I think, 3-0 on a 3-hitter. And his career average in baseball ended up being 2 wins and 1 losses, and all 3 of those decisions were against the Giants, of all things. Well, it turns out that history repeats itself. And so some 40 years later, another player from suburban New Jersey. This time he's from Kearney, New Jersey. It's all 6'7", Ed Halicki. Well, the Giants learned their mistake and they drafted him. And so on a doubleheader, which of course now would no longer count as a no-hitter, on August 24th, 1975, in front of amazing 20-something thousand people at Candlestick, he throws a no-hitter against the Mets. And then as it comes out, it's clear that his favorite team growing up was the Mets. And then, as one of the newspaper titles said, ex-Little Leaguer and Mets fan, no hits the Mets. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that this brings up a unique concept that we need to look at a little more research. But I call it the Eddie Feinstein concept, and that is, if you're a little leaguer growing up in a team and they don't draft you and then you have the chance to pitch against them, you're going to do really well. And interestingly enough, a couple of years ago in the World Series, I think, was it Mike Hill for the Dodgers had the Red Sox thwarted, and then all of a sudden the Dodgers yanked them, and the Dodgers lost that game. Well, I think it was Mike Hill grew up in Boston and was a Red Sox fan. And so to me, that kind of confirms this idea of the Feinstein effect. And then to kind of quote a contemporary Shakespeare William Congreve, it says, the mound has no rage like love to hated turn, nor fastball's fury like a little leaguer scorned. So I think we need to investigate this more as the Feinstein effect on little leaguers pitching against their favorite team is and see what happens. So I thought, but here we have the Giants on the receiving end of both getting no hit and getting beaten by their favorite little leaguer. One of the fascinating coaches in all this was a former coach of Seton Hall and former liquor store owner in Newark, and former Pittsburgh Pirate pitcher named Mlb. And Al was actually undefeated at Seton Hall for a year and a half in the 40s with Chuck Connors playing first base for him. He was also a great tenor voice, baseball banquet speaker, and amateur community play guy. And so the irony here is that he gets fired from coaching the Maplewood team after they went 0 and whatever for the year in the Lackawanna League, and then shows up as in the Maplewood Community Playhouse to standing ovations for his role in Elmer the Great in the Ring Lardner play. And again, he was very famous for appearing at the base. He was a top banquet guy. Again, what really the strength of these leagues in New Jersey were the community baseball leaders. And like a good New Jersey town, we've got a guy named the Count running one team in Madison and Summit. His name was Gil Lasardi. And he was the man who kind of ran amateur baseball and actually was a scout for the Phillies. So he's kind of responsible for bringing some of the players into the Whiz Kids in the 50s for the Phillies team. And then, of course, on the other side of town, there was a man who went by the name of Mr. Baseball, who ran, of all things, a group called Baseball Incorporated of New Jersey, not to be confused with Murder Incorporated or anything else on that one. His name was Bill Manning. And Bill single-handedly took care of every team. And so when you went to play baseball in New Jersey at the time, you'd go to Bill's house in West Orange, and he'd take you to his garage and said, "Son, what team are you playing for?" And you'd say, "Oh, well, I'm playing for South Orange this year." And he'd go in the back of his garage, open up his South Orange box, and say, "Here's your uniform. Don't miss your practice, and we'll see you soon." And that was it. He was the commissioner. He ran baseball. Interesting enough, he also did a newspaper column with this little cartoon there of, "Well, I'll be doggone." And so that appeared in the newspaper as a kind of semi-syndicated column answering baseball questions for almost 20 years in New Jersey. And Maplewood had its own great coach, a guy named Russ Needy, who was a school teacher, and single-handedly, he and his wife ran the Maplewood baseball dynasty for 20 years, winning more games than not, and actually being revered as kind of the godfather of baseball in this town. And once he retired, the team lasted for another years and before they collapsed. But he really is an institution, or what, in Maplewood. And then when we get back to our players who actually played in the Lackawanna League before they made it to the majors, probably none more famous than Joe Black, who played for the Orange Triangles during World War II as a teenager, leading them to different pennants, and then was a Madison Dodger playing for Mrs. Dodge for 1 year before he made it to the big-time Dodgers of Brooklyn. Afterwards, he formed a team called the Joe Black All-Stars. And this was a semi-regular team that played everywhere in North Jersey. And when you got selected to the Joe Black All-Star team, you then played top-notch Negro League and MLB Rookie League teams. And if you played really well and got Joe's attention, then he'd say, "You better go to Ebbets Field next week because somebody will talk to you." And it turns out that if you made a great play, you got yourself a Dodgers tryout. And I ran into numerous players who said they made some great plays with Joe Black All-Stars. And a week later, they got a postcard inviting them to or the Ebbets Field for a game, for tryouts. And then the other pitcher who made my list was a guy named Doc Pollock, who is actually in something called the Semi-Pro Baseball Hall of Fame. He unofficially has 1,024 wins, according to the record, and is also a member of the Roy Hobbs Hall of Fame as well. Jeff Torborg is our catcher, and he's famous for, of all things, playing for, he caught 3 no-hitters, including one with Sandy Koufax, Nolan Ryan, and Ron Singer as well, but he was the main man for the Maplewood. Our pinch hitters was actually another Brooklyn Dodger named Gene Hermansky, who you might have heard of before. He played for the Dodgers for about 10 years. And then John Ward, who never made it to the majors, but ended up as a naval pilot instead. Let's see if you can hear this. And that was Bob Walkey, who left a little tape describing what baseball was like for his team and that. One of the most significant major leaguers was a guy named Eddie Mayo, who played for the Tigers. He played actually for Chatham for a couple years. Actually was MVP before the MVP award was created, and then actually a major league was part of the World Series team. Third base was one of the biggest positions, including Dr. Bobby Brown, who played in Maplewood as a 13-year-old. But third base had a lot of ball players from this league. The shortstop was a man named Lou Walleye, who played for of all things, the Brooklyn Durham Bulls for 1 year, and then was Jackie Robinson's teammate. And in left field, we have Hall of Famer Joe Medwick, who actually played in Summit for a year before he got recruited by Branch Rickey, and then made it to St. Louis. Center fielder was none other than Larry Doby, who played at East Orange and South Orange. And then finally, probably the greatest player of all was Monty Irvin, who played for the Giants, but actually began his career in Orange with the Triangles. And of course, now there's Monty Irvin Park in New Jersey. So, and then the last thing I wanted to show is what happened when they made it to the major leagues. And Eddie Mayo and the Tigers actually played 2 amazing games in the 40s with the Yankees. And we'll just go from there. And so that's it. So I wanted to wrap that up and thank everyone for their time. And then if you have any questions, we'll go from there. So thank you.
Go back one slide. That was really cool. I want to see this slide again too, but I want you to
Sure.
This. Nope. So go
That
back.
one.
Yeah, right there. You gained on it.
Hold on a second. You got to do something.
So Carl Drews, who is the Chatham guy in this scenario? So Eddie Mayo, who's the other guy? Maplewood versus Chatham in Tiger Stadium. Oh, he disappeared.
He said he had to go do something.
Just shut that chicken up.
Maybe his chair knows the answer.
It says facing Yankees Carl Drews, so I don't know if he's the one.
Right, but I don't know if maybe here at the play At the
And then
plate.
actually, in
it's
blue,
like
he's got
Wagner,
Brown playing
Bill
center field,
Johnson.
makes grabs. That's the other possibility.
Rizzuto's in that list, though. I will say it is amazing to see one, how big Don Nukem was. Man, he's big. I mean, if you go look, because it's in that picture, it has him with Campanella and Jackie Robinson, and he's towering over both of those guys. So it's certainly interesting from that regard.
The dude looks like he's meat at the plate on that picture, though, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he should be out. He tries to score.
He tries to score.
No, he probably did not make it.
Yeah, so the two key players on this game were Eddie Mayo from Chatham and Dr. Bobby Brown from Maplewood.
Bobby Brown.
And
I always thought he was a second baseman. He played center field briefly. In
this is his first year. So the story goes, both games, the Tigers jumped out to a huge lead. And Joe DiMaggio says, "I'm tired of playing. It's the fifth inning. We're down by a ton of runs," and says, "Okay, I'm hanging up the spikes today. We're getting crushed." And then miracle of miracles, the Yankees catch him. And if you look at the believe it or not box score, you see Joe DiMaggio went 4 for 3. He contributed greatly. But the Yankees gave up 9 runs in the 7th, and Joe didn't want to play after that. So Bobby Brown plays center field, and when we get to the and then scores a run and gets a hit. But as he's playing center field, Eddie Mayo hits this, as Bobby Brown said to me, was this massive drive to deep left center at Tiger Stadium, and tracked it down and caught it to everyone's surprise. But ironically, Baseball Reference noted that it was an unknown out on the play. And so we're here to let everyone know that Bobby Brown actually played center field and made that catch. So he deserves a put out, even though he's known as unknown, according to the record. And a month earlier, they played the same kind of game in Detroit that ended up, Eddie Mayo ended up winning at that one with a double in the 11th. So
I will say this, and maybe you know, Keith, because you're a smart feller.
But
or some mix of those letters.
Who knows?
There are 4 umpires listed for this game. When do they go to 4 umpires?
Probably about that time. So it's post-war. So
yeah, I know, but I thought they had 3 umpires for the longest time, like the minor leagues do now. I mean, I thought it was a lot longer than 1947. I can tell you that. I'm surprised that's not the 70s when that happened.
No, it was in the mid to late 50s that they went.
Yeah. Well, I can see it's in the mid to late 40s right there, Howard.
No, but that's not typical.
Yeah.
So it was
it's very interesting.
Hey, I was going to tell you too. I don't know when you pulled it from Baseball Reference, but maybe you told them your correct answer. But as of today, it says fly ball out center field on Baseball Reference for this game.
I did call them once. Did they fix it?
It looks like they fixed it.
Good.
It says fly ball. It says fly ball center field instead of unknown out. So I guess you got Baseball Reference to do an update.
Cool.
If you need any help with that, I'm happy to.
Yeah, we might know a guy.
Yeah, we know a guy. The other thing that's fascinating is that even though that the game lasted, it was 14-13, they did it all in 3 hours and 18 minutes.
Yeah.
Baseball before television.
Yes.
Well, but I thought it was really interesting. It was just, those 2 games about a month apart that were scoreboard busters, if you will, or scorecard busters.
Yeah.
Both featuring Lackawanna League players.
Usually my scorecard can handle 3 to 5 runs in an inning. That 9 is a real pain in the ass, though.
It would be, yeah, and you have, in the 11th inning tier, you have what? A guy who walked for Swift, another runner and then another pinch hitter.
Right, but yeah, I mean, it's a pretty quality. There's George Kell, there's Roy Cullenbine, Virgil Trucks. I mean, it's a pretty chock full of stars game going on even on the Detroit side. Vic Wertz, I assume that's Vic Wertz.
Yeah. This is Tigers, had just won the World Series 2 years earlier in 45. So, this was the Yankee dynasty getting rolling again after the war, and the Tigers still working off their season of 45 as being the best team in baseball. So this is, two Titans going at it. Amazing. In summer of 47.
I don't know if anybody else has other questions, but the other thing I wanted to say that was very interesting to me in this is that Lady Dodge, whatever her first name is, Rowena.
Geraldine.
Yeah, name. Geraldine Rockefeller Dodge. She named her teams the Dodgers, but we all know that's not why they're called the Dodgers. So it's very interesting that she did go with the Dodgers for a different reason. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, in Madison, she really was the benefactor to Madison. So Madison High School is called the Dodgers. They play at Dodger Field.
Yeah.
So the town and the train station and the downtown core of Madison was actually rebuilt with her money.
It's funny. I know a guy that lives in Madison, and I've been in Madison a handful of times, and it's never occurred to me that I should look around and see what else is there, because it actually says that Nukem was born in Madison.
Yeah.
So that was very, very. Next time I go back, for those of you wondering, where so those of you that used to work at Catalent's headquarters in Somerset. One of the nearby small towns is Madison.
Right.
And people live in
Drew University and Fairleigh Dickinson are in Madison too. So
ridiculous, yes.
Yeah, and when she died, she left her. I think Fairleigh Dickinson took her estate, so it was over 1,000 acres. It was exceptional.
Excellent.
And like the third or fourth largest house in the United States after the Biltmore.
Very cool.
And that the other thing I wanted to just to note, really, which was kind of interesting, is baseball in Orange, New Jersey goes all the way back to 1855. So it's one of the earliest documented baseball sports smack talk in the newspaper. A team called the Mountain challenged, or a team called the Washington Baseball Club challenged a team called Mountain to come play them, and the Mountain team never showed up, and so the Washington Baseball Club said, "We stand ready anytime to play you boys whenever you make it over the mountain and play us." So I just thought it was kind of interesting that, sports smack talk goes all the way back to the beginning of baseball.
It's pretty fantastic.
But yeah, so it's an old tradition. So that kind of wraps it up. So I will unshare and we'll go from there.
Phoebe here again? Who is Phoebe here? Phoebe Snow?
Phoebe Snow was a media creation for the Lackawanna Railroad on their signature train that went from Hoboken to Buffalo.
Man, that seems more familiar than that.
And she was also, the name was taken by a singer, a folk singer from a couple years ago.
I feel better about that.
And she always wears white because Lackawanna made their money on anthracite coal, which supposedly was cleaner burning than soft coal.
Okay.
So that is her. Anyway.
Anybody have any other questions you want to jump in there and talk to him about? Obviously, Keith's always around and is very generous with his time.
So I stop share. There you go.
There you go. Well, we're down to 6, so you're going to eat those questions, Howard. You're going to save them for next time.
Whatever you want.
I think that would be best.
But
I don't want you to waste a good set of questions on this collection of
By the way,
Scholars.
the
Scholars.
Ne'er-do-wells.
the
There
box
it is.
score,
Go ahead, Howard.
the box score that we were looking at from the Yankees Tigers in 1947 that had 4 umpires. It was a double header that day, so maybe that's why they had 4 umpires.
I considered that. I considered that when I was reading it, but I kind of glanced around to see if there were any real indicators of doubleheader, but I didn't see it, so I went with it, and that's a really good point. That would be why there would be the exception.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I recall 3 umpires was when I first started going to games at Ebbets Field, they had a band called the Dodger Symphony. And whenever the umpires would come out at the beginning of the game, the band would play 3 Blind Mice. We couldn't do that with 4.
So if we're gonna save Howard's trivia, I have a single trivia question that might be good for this collection of ne'er-do-wells. Can we do that?
Get in there. Get in there.
All right. There have been 6 players in MLB history who have 10 or more letters in their last name who have hit 40 or more homers in a season. How many can this group come up with?
Every one of them. It's only 40. It's only it's 40 home runs. I mean, that's a real number.
It's a good list. So you got 6 guys, 40 or more homers, 10 or more letters in their last names.
Kluszewski.
Yastrzemski?
Yastrzemski.
That's 2 of them.
Did you say Kluszewski?
Yeah, he said Kluszewski. So you got Clue and Yaz. That's 2.
Killebrew?
What did you say?
Killebrew's 9.
I like how immediately nobody says Kluszewski or Yastrzemski. Oh, it's Clue and Yaz. We're not doing all of that.
There's only those. Although there's another Yaz now, so
Yes.
Actually, there's not, but you guys got 2 of them right off the bat.
Yeah, those are probably the easy ones. But there's 40 home runs. How many? I mean, how can it be? All right, you just have to reset your mind after that 1940s conversation.
It's not Lackawanna. That's not one of them.
It is not. Oh,
Is that 10?
I got one. Petrocelli.
Petrocelli is another one.
go.
You know what year he did it, Howard?
68.
69.
Nice. I was waiting. I was all ready for the nice. I was working on the nice. Absolutely. I knew it was 1969, if that helps at all.
And Yaz did it 3 times, which I didn't appreciate until I saw this question. I didn't realize.
Well, he played at Fenway. I mean,
yeah, I guess so.
I could hit 40 home runs at Fenway.
As a left-handed batter?
I'm a lefty. Oh, yeah. Hook it around Pesky's pole right there all day. 3. Is it even 250? Is it even 250?
You just hit a pop-up to left center.
Yeah.
Yeah, a pop-up anywhere in left field's a home run.
I mean, they make joke of ballparks all the time, but come on.
So you got there's one more historical guy on this list, and then there's 2 modern guys, 2 recent.
All right.
No Google.
No kidding. That Howard, because we use Google for yours, and we still don't get any of them right.
Well, if you start getting them, I'll go back to making them harder.
Yeah, that's the only way to do it. Oh, come on.
You got one more Hall of Famer,
There's a
50s,
Hall of
60s.
Famer?
You guys will be
Think of a
all
Hall of
over this
Famer?
guy. You just haven't thought of him yet. The 2 newer ones will be the interesting one to see if you guys come up with.
Holy moly. I'm in a world of trouble now.
Campanella.
1953.
Campanella.
There you go. There's your historical.
We had a picture of him earlier too. We should have thought of that.
Now you got a guy who did it in 2011 and 2012, and then another guy who did it in 2012 and 2016. 40 or more homers. So two modern names.
one of them's got to be Encarnacion.
Edwin Encarnacion. That's right. That's one of them.
The guy's around 11 or 12 or both.
One more back-to-back years, 41 homers in 2011, 43 homers in 2012. Outfielder. Chris said you get every single one.
We only have one more to go, so right? It's just one more.
And in fairness, the question as written said name 5 of the 6. So you guys actually have done that, but in this crowd.
I know who it is. Mets. I know who it is. Mets.
There you go.
I know who it is. I'll wait.
I was waiting for you to get it.
Well, if you hadn't given me the year, right, that actually mattered to me. That actually mattered to me. I mean, that is what we paid for per the guy. We didn't get that.
Yeah, how'd that free agent contract work?
That is what we do. That is what we do. I'll spoil it. He's special. That was the old joke. He's special. He's also he is a top Roberto Clemente guy, top Roberto Clemente award guy. And that he's extremely generous and wins that award and nomination. Ex-Yankee and Met.
Strawberry?
That is 5 letters.
He never hit 40, did it?
No.
He definitely didn't do it in 2011.
The wrong year. Yeah.
He also played for the Tigers. Now, he's somebody that would have been in this thing that exceeded the performance of his contract. You know, but he would be in there twice. That's actually the ironic thing. One time exceeded. The second time didn't exceed. We should have asked that question. By the way, I enjoyed Dave's presentation, but you have to use WAR in that situation. Or at least OPS plus to remove the park effects.
Park, yeah.
Anybody think of it? Anybody? I did Curtis.
Curtis Granderson?
Oh, it's Granderson. Yes.
So you got Campanella in 53, Klaczewski, Yastrzemski 3 times, Petrocelli in 1969, and then you go almost 50 years without a guy with 10 letters in his last name hitting 40 homers. And you get Granderson and Encarnacion. I liked that question.
How many
players waiting to work it in here?
In their last name in the intro. Well, actually, Yastrzemski. We said Yastrzemski 3 times, but was Yastrzemski's all 3 of his before Petrocelli's?
No, I guess it kind of overlapped. So 67, 69, and 70. So yeah, they overlapped.
That was very good. So in the Lackawanna presentation, I'll have a trivia question. In the Lackawanna presentation, Jeff Torborg was quoted as having caught 3 no-hitters. That was the record forever when I was a kid, and it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But now the record is held by 2 catchers who have called 4 no-hitters. Name them. And I will tell you right now, they are catchers on the teams of the favorite teams of people on this call. That's not completely true, but they're certainly from
Jason
where
Veritek.
they're from.
Jason Veritek.
Jason Veritek is one.
Buster Posey at 4?
Who? No.
Buster Posey, or is he?
Maybe later this year. Maybe later this year.
Yeah.
Molina?
No, that's a good guess. It's actually a little easier than I would have thought if you actually stop and think about who threw no-hitters. Oh man, that ran Francis off. He did not care for that at all. He's in you said Molina, and he was like, I'm out. F that guy. He does not like Molina. You remember that?
Who?
I didn't know.
Jorge Posada
was Veritek. I just thought the answer was Veritek. I was surprised, and he caught his last no-hitter in 2015, so it's not even that long ago. And he caught at least by 2 of them, and I don't know who all 4 of them, but 2 of them were from very famous pitchers. So not pitchers that like, you know, whoever John Means. They're not John Means ones, you know, like Torborg. Oh, who'd you catch him with? Nolan Ryan, Sandy Govek. Okay, those are pretty good.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting with the Sandy Koufax one, if I do another paper, will be on the curses of the Cubs, and that was actually one of the Cubs' curse days, September 9th.
Okay, that was an unusual one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you, it's Chooch. Carlos Ruiz with the Phillies, because he was there for Halladay, he was there for Hamels. I don't know who the other 2 are, but those are 2 big time things. But I did not know Chooch caught. And hold on, I gotta make sure my dog's not peeing on the carpet right quick. Hey, boy, don't do that. Lay on the thing. All right. Well, that was I really enjoyed the meeting. And by the way, it's always my favorite when it ends up like the 5 of us. So I have another question about your thing, but I forgot what it was, Keith.
All right.
I sent you a message on the chat. Your volume on your microphone was too loud. It was murder.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, it wasn't just me. I thought it was just me. It might be me, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a setting, Keith, or something, but it's overblowing.
I mean, actually, you were clear. We could understand what you were saying. It was loud and crackly. Look at you. See Howard? See how nice Howard is, and he didn't want to say anything. But look at him when I say that.
Okay.
Because you're setting on sensitivity on your microphone. But the second thing is that picture of Horace Stoneham that you put up.
Yeah. Is that
That
better?
looks like the cover of Steve Treater's book. Oh, you're very clear right there.
Yeah. That's
clear.
better.
Oh, that's perfect. But you know Steve Treater. Do you know Steve Treater?
No. I forget where I got that from. It could have been from that book.
But he just got, so he's so I'm president of 2 chapters. One of them is Baseball Think Factory. You all should join that because it is only a social hour. We don't really have, this is my meeting chapter. And the other one is my social hour chapter where we talk about whatever. It literally so the last meeting we had. So go, and when you go on the SABR website, join that chapter. It's a virtual chapter, a chartered community.
What's it called?
Baseball Think Factory, BTF. Bind, turn, I haven't worked out the initials.
So
Somewhere between. I can't even work up that joke, but I'm going to for the BTF chapter. It's Baseball Think Factory Chartered Community. Just go to, it's the only chartered community that is an actual chapter. The other ones are actually committees if you look at them because they're about specific topics. We're a social club. Fair, Jeff?
That's a good description. Yes, I don't think through SABR I'm a member of it because I don't get the links when you guys have those meetings. I got to figure out.
You have to go on to sabr.org right now.
I see the Slack chat we're meeting, but I never get the
Go on sabr.org right now.
Yeah.
Go to and when it says join, and when you go to your groups, it will give you the option to join chartered communities.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to do this.
And join BTF.
Join group done. Yes, I do want to join. Now I'm in it.
Because now because it's just raucous. It has a lot of West Coast people, so they're later in the evening. Howard, you can see by your bedtime. But seriously, don't you want to have the Howard Wasserman that read this article? I mean, come on, that's going to be great.
I also caught it. I don't know if you guys saw it on Dave's spreadsheet. He had Wasserman as the agent for at least one of those players.
Howard must be busy.
Howard's busy.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the agency is Wasserman. It comes from Louis Wasserman, who started the first big Hollywood agency, which I think is MCI. Can't
you
remember.
See Bueller down there? He's at LA.
He was one of the richest people in Hollywood because he had almost all the big stars.
So what's the age? So Brian, see, so Howard, down at the bottom is Brian Ellenberg, who I grew up with. So he is a member of our chapter. He's from North Carolina, but he lives in Hollywood and has worked in the industry for the last 40 years, 35 years. So maybe he knows anything about it. It's always funny when those things just all of a sudden mesh. Man, that dog stinks.
Yes,
Anyway.
35 years.
35 years. Apologies. But so that was fantastic. We're gonna bounce. If y'all want just a social club, and Howard, I can tell you right now, your trivia questions would rock. Go join that. I can tell you right now, you come and do a trivia thing, that is a crowd that will love it. Like our crowd kind of like, oh, we don't know much about trivia. But if you go to the BTF one, they know about, it will be embraced. So join that committee, and and just like all Ireland, come in at 8:30, leave at 9:30. Nobody's expected to stay the whole time. It's not like you're getting up and walking out on a presentation. It's a Zoom meeting. Keith, that was fantastic. Sir. I really appreciate it again. I did cheat. I don't know if you do Facebook, but I cheated. So John Thorne posted your poster the other day.
Oh yeah.
Last time, and I was right in there talking about how Keith Robbins brought the hammer on that story. And John was like, "Yeah, Keith and I are friends."
Yeah, John's the only one in the world who knows more about my family than I do, since he wrote the book.
So what is it? What does your wife know him? I'm sorry, that's not.
No. Baseball in the Garden of Eden is all about my family.